Welcome everybody to this new episode of the Liberated Man Podcast, coming at you live 2020 from Koh Phangan, Thailand. And I'm hanging out with my brother Matty Monster. And he's come all the way from the States, all the way from New Jersey to...
I say New York because it's less embarrassing.
Yeah, well, New York or New Jersey, sort of depending on, you know. I'm working on my accents. I'm slowly getting them.
You're getting better.
Yeah. So anyway, good to be around these global citizens and learning about things. So Matty's come all the way from the US to hang out in Thailand with me. Mm-hmm. For the last 2 weeks, intimately, we've been hanging out in Thailand. Now he came over here to have a great time when we've just finished this amazing 2-week retreat called the Way of the Black Dragon Experience. And it covers a lot of different bases and a lot of really cool things. But anyway, we got this opportunity, we got this time, we've got this beautiful scene. We're sitting by the pool here, looking out at the ocean, and we figured we should do a podcast because there's been many times that we've had chats, and we'll get into exactly like how we know each other and all that kind of thing. But you know, Matthew's basically a liberated man in his own right, and I think he's got a lot of cool things to share. And also, what I wanted to bring him on for is because he's a dedicated student / client / seeker of the way, and he's been doing things for a very long time, and we've been working together for the last few years. So it's going to be an exciting chat. We're going to cover whatever happens because interesting things tend to happen. So anyway, so welcome, Matty.
Thank you.
And yeah, tell me a little bit about your background in the sense of like where you came from in terms of your self-development journey, how you found me. I mean, don't get too involved in that, but we can give a bit of detail.
I'll try to be, I grew up right by New York City, so we were like city kids. It was really a fun time. It was the 80s and the 90s, and you walked everywhere, and it was a blast. But then there was this kind of idea, like a structure of how life should run back then, which is kind of like high school, college, you party, you meet somebody, you kind of like get engaged, you get married, you're 27, then you're 30, you're having some kids, and then you do the thing, and then you die. I mean, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And that was like the system that I was a part of, and my friends tended to push it back a little later, the friends from high school, but it always felt a little stifling to me. And when I basically followed the track, and when I had my girlfriend in college, and she was great, and there was at that point where other people, after college, people were getting engaged, I was freaking out. I felt like I was going to be like laying in a pine box, like I was putting one foot in the grave. So I was like getting all anxious, and I couldn't do it. This relates to being a liberated man, in that I was still a boy. I mean, at the time, my girlfriends or my mom was doing everything for me. I was not really a man, and so it's like a lot of people skip that part. They go straight from their mom to their wife, and then they start raising kids, and they never actually became independent, strong, self-sufficient man. And I could have easily done that, and probably would have had an okay life, but I was always, I guess, driven and by something else. So I always went against the grain anyway, so that led to a whole bunch of other interesting life stories and living in different places, always in the Northeast, like Philadelphia, New York, and New Jersey mostly. I kind of stick around my family. But I got in... as culture changed, dating changed, and I always was like, I didn't understand dating, but I always did okay, and then at some point things started to really flip between the online dating and social media things, and at some point I just kind of saw like I wasn't understanding the system at all, and then I started doing research on it, and that's how I came across Shay, and what we realized was a lot of my problems were inner thought problems. I was highly negative towards myself, and self-critical, bad self-esteem issues, things that weren't... I was incongruent. I had a life that was great, and then inside, everyone thought I was like super, super, super happy, and I'm a happy person, but inside I was always like self-hating, remembering bad things, and it's just a horrible habit, right? So Shay helped me break the habit, and then in turn it just made me way happier, and then in turn it made me even nicer to other people, and I just feel like released from a lot of the trappings of what many people I know get stuck in, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good synopsis. I mean, I think, like, to kind of reflect on that a little bit, like you like me also, I mean, a child of the 80s and the 90s, really. And I think a lot of the narratives at that time were a little bit more simplistic. I mean, it was a little bit, it was pre-internet, and it was like the information tsunami that we're dealing with these days. And I think the world still was in this fairly simplistic worldview, let's say. It was a relatively kind of cookie cutter kind of process.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, of course, there was quite a lot of intelligence out there as well. And for anybody who had that more alternative nature, I think that was a bit of a boom time as well. I mean, I think for me, growing up especially through the 90s and maybe the late 90s, where it was interesting looking at the mainstream and the media at that time as well, in the sense of like, there was actually quite a lot of like counterculture and like anti-establishment kind of like vibes coming up. I mean, you had like things like NWA with like Fuck the Police and Rage Against the Machine, and these are like top 40 like artists. I mean, that was kind of crazy to think like that was the stuff when you turn on like the TV and you'd watch your like MTV or whatever.
Yeah. Now it's not like that.
Yeah, I think Justin Bieber doesn't quite carry that vibe.
It's all just parties and shallow crap.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was interesting kind of time to grow up through that, and so I can vibe on your story in terms of that, and also I think, I mean, it's a really typical kind of story, right, in the sense of like just doing your best with what you got, and until you know what you don't know, then you tend to just be sort of at a certain level, and so I think I can also relate to Matt's story in the sense of like I chose to take the path less ordinary, let's say. I chose to opt out of a lot of narratives that most people were just following without much questioning, because I had a sense of skepticism, and things like that. So I think that in some ways that's the beginning of the hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
It's like the hero's journey begins with this kind of like breakdown of your sense of like established self. And there's multiple ways that can happen, but I think especially for a lot of guys in the modern context, it comes with like questioning. Do I really want to just go with the flow of like what society tells me? Do I really just want to like
the course that you did this month, it's what's missing from the general education that we get. Mm-hmm. And the general education we get is almost like a competition-based, achievement-based system where it's like, get these grades, get this rank, then you go here, then you win this trophy, then you get this, then you get that. And then you see life in that one way, but it doesn't teach you how to be happy with yourself. So there's a lot of people who win awards, get great grades, get a great job. They do all the things they're taught are important, but then they're still like miserable or they're anxious all the time because I was never exposed to any lessons about, well, how do I feel good within me? How do I figure out what I want? How do I look at things from a different way? How do I enjoy success? How do I handle failure? Like, these are things that are just missing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the one thing that we did in this class that's great. And then the other thing is, how do you connect your mind and body, which all links up with all this?
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but what Matthew's talking about is like I just ran this 14-day process, and it was stacked in a certain kind of way. Because so to kind of to go back, and we'd sort of flash back a little bit as well, because I think we'll build up into what we're talking about is more like like the challenge of being a human being is it's multidimensional, right? So to be a human being means you've got to like orient yourself. You've got to work out like, who am I? How does the world work? How do I fit into the world? And that's very context dependent. So it depends on your background, your culture, your circumstances. All these different things affect who you are and where you're coming from. And as we move into like a world that's increasingly sophisticated and demanding of our time and attention, especially when it comes to potentially like time wasting things, in the sense of like, if we wanted to, and we all do it to a degree, if we wanted to, we could be spending the majority of our lives just fucking around on stuff that makes no sense. Like you could just watch Netflix and tweet your life away and muck around with problems with tech forever and
video games just all day and not
play
do anything.
Exactly. So there's kind of like this increasing level of sophistication and distraction that's available to people inside of the world. As in some sense, maybe like a shadow, I would say. We can talk about that a little bit more, but as in like it's a compensation, or almost like a reflection of the repression that's happening inside of society because of the the confusion basically that's happening because of our lack of meaning. That's kind of what you're talking about, like lack of meaning. And we could step back from that and like frame it in a lot of different ways, in the sense of, like having a lack of strong male role models, strong male kind of like initiatory structures and society and things that are basically healthy models for men, has created this gap. And of course that gap is being filled with a lot of like things. And it's that's part of the path that I've gone on, in the sense of I've evolved over time with a sort of genuine desire. I mean, I had my kind of awakening when I was like 18, and in the sense of like, I had finished high school, I hated high school. I mean, in retrospect, I probably could have done a lot better out of it and all the rest of it, but they never framed it as anything useful. That was the problem. Like, I could never connect the dots in terms of like, I go to this place, they sit me down for 6 hours, they fill my brain with shit that I'm not really interested in. I'm stuck in this kind of like, stupid social hierarchy that I wasn't interested in the sense of like, you had the different kind of sections, like you had the kind of jock dudes and the guys who were like because I came from an alpine area, so the guys who were like the skiers, and then the guys who were like from the farms. And
there's skiing in Australia?
Yeah, skiing in Australia.
I never heard of that.
Well, I grew up in the very tiny little part of Australia where we have a little tiny bit of snow that comes down just like on one little mountain.
All right.
No, that's not true. There's quite a big mountain range, but it's not world class, that's for sure. But it is a place. Anyway, so I grew up in this kind of environment where there was like these little cliques of things going on, and coming from an alternative background in the sense of being a bit of a hippie kid, being someone who wasn't really like part of the mainstream narrative, let's say, I already felt like an outsider of that, and that set me up to have this very different perspective on things and wanting to like look at the world from a much more alternative perspective. And I mean, long story short, that led me down this whole path of like, getting into healing and body work and spirituality, which then led me to things like communication and coaching and seduction and men's work. And then, I joined the Natural Lifestyles, and we worked with them for a long time. So I'm still, one of the head coaches for the Natural Lifestyles for the last 10 years. And that whole kind of process has really showed me over and over and over again the need and the necessity for a more sophisticated set of solutions and narratives. And something that is we can start to open up as well is that like as we grow up and as we evolve and as we we deal with our maturity, we need to learn how to balance ourselves with the world, and that means like finding more effective ways to live. So part of what we're doing here in Thailand, and also part of what I'm doing moving forward with the Liberated Man project, is to create some communication structures, some hubs, some training, some sort of solutions for these things that are super important. So to bounce that back to you in some sense of like, you have been you're a fairly intellectual guy. I mean, you're a very extroverted, outgoing guy. He's a genius. But honestly, like, I mean, I've known Matt for a number of years now, and we've had a lot of chats over the years. And one of the things that I know you're very dedicated to is, seeking good knowledge, good information, useful information.
Yes.
Stuff about health, stuff about lifestyle, stuff about like how can you maximize your life. And on a scale of like, let's say like success, I'd say you've got yourself into a position where you're fairly liberated. Like you have a good career, you have management over your time, you have like a sort of dynamic dating life. Your health is good. I mean, you wouldn't guess his age. I'm not going to tell you, but he looks like he's a little boy, but he's really actually a man. So he's
I'm working on it.
Yeah, he's working on it. So anyway, like, tell me a little bit about like, what was your philosophy trying to like confront this basic like masculine existential crisis that you were part of, whether you were conscious of it or not? Trying to find solutions to your place in the world and how you could make the most out of it.
I mean, I think in my 20s I thought I was the only one that had problems with this type of stuff. And
And that's a key false
Yeah.
reality a lot of guys fall into, is this ideal that like they're isolated, you know, that they're depressed and they're the only ones, or they're the only ones who get it, or, you know, things like that. But anyway.
I mean, to be honest, one of the things that made everything more clear, because I didn't follow the path of my college friends and a lot of my high school friends, is that once they got into the system, the kind of like following the routine, career, marriage, children, I would be very positive to them about it, like, hey, and they'd always be like kind of negative about it. And I was like, shit, it doesn't seem like they controlled their destiny. It was like it got put on them and they accept it. And I was looking for a lot of like enthusiasm about their life, because I want to, you know, become normal and like, you know, own a suburban house, like in a concept of like, you know, do the normal thing.
Yeah.
And it's like every time it reinforces my lifestyle is like way better. So I have a few people who I think got it right, but vast majority who just kind of blindly followed the course. It seemed like, you know, they're not that satisfied, and that's what made me really say like, oh, me, you know, maybe it's not me. You know, I was like, oh, these people are doing the right thing, and they're not, you know. So then I realized, oh, it's more about finding who you are, becoming a real individual, and then doing that stuff. And I felt like really good about the journey I've been on, because I've learned so much, I've grown so much. A lot of people I know, they literally are the same general person they were when they were 24. They, you know, they don't expand out. They just, you know, watch the same sports and do the same things, and they're still awesome, and I still love hanging out with them. But there hasn't been a lot of like growth and change and maturing and development.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess that comes from this kind of need for exploring and learning that you've had basically an appetite for on some level. And it's a blessing in the sense of like sometimes when you feel like you're isolated or you're an outsider or you're down and out or something's not working, maybe that's actually like your biggest get out of jail free card in a way. I mean, in the sense of like that could be the thing that pushes you to have new experiences, make alternative choices, you know, create a different sort of destiny for yourself. And I mean, that's the thing that I think is actually a blessing in disguise for a lot of people. So learning to see things those ways is super important. And, you know, for me, yet again, and in my perspective, like it starts with just being hungry for knowledge and ability that sets you up. So you kind of said it in the sense of like not settling for a destiny that's out of your control. And that was a big one that was actually very tormenting for me growing up, is like I was really like, you know, I was really set on like, I do not want to find myself in a reality where I'm limited. So I guess in some sense I have a very high value on things like freedom and experience and expression. So anything that started to come in and impinge on that, it became a threat. And I mean, I had the same kind of story in the sense of being in long-term relationships, probably around that kind of late 20s, early 30s kind of stage. And felt like, you know, if I was to pursue that and to turn that into a marriage and a family, which part of me kind of wanted at that time, it was also going to be a big sacrifice of my warrior self. And also looking back, you know, now I'm like a whole 40 years old, I'm looking back and I'm thinking, well, I'm really glad that I kind of weirdly sabotaged some of those things, because, and I got to have so many other experiences. And now I'm getting to a stage where, you know, maturity and a sense of self is something that is intrinsic to my lifestyle now. And that's very different to, you know, if you're just in, let's say, you know, reactive survival mode, etc. And this is not to say there's any judgment on this as well, because it's not here to, you know, to sort of, I recognize like a lot of people come from, you know, backgrounds where they're doing the best that they can with what they had. And there's nothing wrong with having long-term relationships. There's nothing wrong with following a traditional education system. There's nothing wrong with developing a career and buying a house and like going through the sort of narratives. That
Some people are very happy doing that, and that's great.
Yeah.
If you're happy doing it, it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's different types of people, and then it's also if you find the right girl versus selecting the one that's in front of you.
Yeah.
But you know, some people they're very happy with that, and that's cool. We need different types of people in the world, right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's the kind of a key point, you know. So just to add a little bit of like a secret mindset that will change your life forever right now. One of the coolest things that I believe you can start to take on is this mindset that, like, in some sense, everybody's correct, everybody's right. You know, everybody is in their bubble doing what they believe is the best thing that they can do. And then what that means is, like, if somebody comes at you with a worldview that doesn't match with your worldview, if somebody has an opinion, if somebody has, you know, a perspective that doesn't align with your perspective, then you kind of got a choice. You can either, like, try to fight them on it and get, like, offended, or to, like, you know, to protect your boundaries and say, like, fuck you, like, my way is the right way. And there's a lot of people in the world that are very, very invested in being right, even at the point of, like, if it makes their life absolute suffering. You know, they will more than happily, you know, destroy their relationships, you know, create big dramas,
Ruin their
careers, yeah.
Spite themselves, really.
All to make a point that they're, you know, that my narrative in my head is the way that it is. And I get it, because it's some sense it's related to our sense of self and our survival mechanisms and our worldview, and ultimately it's actually, like, related to this kind of romantic fantasy that many people have, that, like, you know, the world should make sense, and then if we can make sense of it, then the world's a safe
I was
place.
caught in that a lot. I was caught in thinking about, this isn't right. I shouldn't have to do this. Why is it like this? I'm not doing this. It's like, you got to work within the system that you're in. Mm-hmm. You can't, if you're fighting it and you're not working within it, you're not going to be successful.
Right.
You can still have your belief systems and understand some of these things are bullshit, like me having to take a selfie, like, over a cliff with fucking palm trees just to show off to some girls, where I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but it's like, it's a part of the system now. It's a part of life. Like, if I did that 20 years ago, I'd punch myself in the face. But it's like, it is what it is. So you got to work with what you have. So a few of my friends, like, helped me with just saying, look, this is how it is. You got to be here now. So.
Yeah, I agree with that, and like the key theme is really just to, like, to take on an attitude of, like, it's okay that there's a lot of things going on in the world, that different people have different opinions, and different people have their own, you know, their own experiences and perspectives and their own desires and their own, you know, ways of seeing things. So I think it's a game-changing perspective, and also a very, like, energy conserving and also, like, liberating perspective to take on this, like, everything is what it is. Everything is right as it is. And what that frees you up from is that what that also means is that you don't have to take on anybody else's thing. You don't have to take on anybody else's beliefs, worldviews, limitations, responsibilities, obligations. I mean, that's for you to negotiate and work out where your boundaries are.
Criticism,
exactly. So
stuff like that.
So a liberated person, in my opinion, is somebody that is partly, anyway, at least has this kind of mindset of, like, they're allowed to be their own independent entity with their own worldview, and so is everybody else. And that also comes back to, I think it's a bit of a theme. We don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole, but, like, part of the challenge that we're up against in our, like I say, our modern context, and especially in our last decade or so, has been that people are so, like, overwhelmed with, like, just the nature of sophistication. That's what's happening in the world, that one of the protection mechanisms that started to come out of people is trying to tell everybody what to do. It's like everybody's trying to be like, that makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm really triggered. You can't do that. Like, this kind of mindset of self-protection, as opposed to, like, looking at how can you fortify what you already actually are. So how do you strengthen yourself? And I'm a big fan of, like, you know, building strong individuals, making people powerful from the position that they are. And we could break that down in some ways, but I really feel like, and it's part of what I'm trying to do here with this building a liberated man and the course and things, is if we were to, like, look at, let's say, where or how the healthy aspects of our humanitarian kind of perspectives have become corrupted, then part of what's happened is we've sort of lost our way from being, like, first of all, connected to nature, right? So that's the first thing. So, and that doesn't mean, you know, you have to walk around in your underpants, like, you know, kissing the rocks or whatever. It just means you need to be appreciative of the fact that you come from the earth, you know, and when you do things like eat healthy food, get good sleep, get some good exercise, breathe fresh air, like, expose yourself to the raw elements. Like, here we get to swim in the ocean, you know, we are exposed to trees, we're in this open, beautiful environment. Like, that creates a foundation of nature connection.
You taught me that nature can be a way to to detach from a current painful situation, to change your perspective, to reconnect with like outdoors, living trees, the sky, everything, and then you can remove yourself from like a current situation where you're really trapped in what you want and what's making you upset, and it's very peaceful to kind of be able to step out of that and step into nature, you know. And I was a city person. Like, to me, I was glad nature was there, but I don't go camping. I don't do any of that crap.
Yeah, and look, it's normal. Yet again, it's normal to, like, you know, get out of bed in your like 2-story, 3-story, 4-story concrete box. You know, put on your rubber shoes, walk around in your rubber shoes, get in your little metal box car, stick your radio, you know, your EMF phone to your head all day. You know, sit in front of radioactive monitors like this, and you know, under fluorescent lights, and I mean all this kind of stuff that we take for granted, and obviously it depletes us. And if we pay attention, like we come from nature, right? We come from the earth. We come from our connection. Now, what that really means is that there is a fundamental, you know, definitely like probably deeper than cellular DNA, kind of like even energetic resonance that we have with coming from the earth. And what that really means in basic terms is we can, if we choose to, start to put value on the fact that we have an important connection with the world, and we can start to work with that. And this is really good for getting laid. You know why? Because when you start to feel good about yourself, and you start to feel connected to reality, when you start to feel connected to the nature of things, then you also start to get connected to the nature of other people. You start to get connected to the nature of your internal true self.
And what's more natural than sex?
That's
I
true.
mean, all the animals are doing it.
And the whole universe is just one big fuckfest, basically. Yeah. So you could look at it from that kind of perspective, and I think that's a good kind of paradigm to venture into sometimes.
It's also a good way to connect with your primitive man. You know, I'm an engineer. I'm in an office. I can't use my physicality usually in any sense, and I'm in front of computers and machines. I mean, I love machines. Machines are cool, you know. But I'm that guy, but I'm also the primitive man, and it's like when you stop to be in nature and you really pay attention, you could connect with like your ancestors, and that's like a liberated man kind of vibe. You know what I mean? Yep. And you could be missing that for years. You could just not do it. Yep. And it provides strength, I think.
Well, we come from, you know, like human beings come from nature, you know, and just to give you some kind of perspective, like there is a worldview called an animistic worldview. So animistic means like you are connected to the world through consciousness. The world is conscious, and your consciousness is interfacing with consciousness. You know, so this water is like conscious, and this ocean is conscious, and these trees are conscious, and the sky is conscious. Now, what that means is like it's not like I'm speaking English to them like, "Hey, water, how are you today? You look nice and blue." You know, it's like you could treat it like that, but that's a very like naive and very mental way to look at it. It's more like this is a substance. It gives life. It's part of me. It's part of, you know, I'm sweating it, I'm drinking it, I'm pissing it out. It's coming into my body. You know, it's like it's part of the cycle of life. And when I appreciate that and I pay attention to that and I connect with that, then there is something inside me that remembers. It's like, I'm connected. And I think that there is a part of our deep, you know, existential suffering, and that manifests as a lot of problems. And what I see, and this is a core thing, is, I mean, a lot of guys come to like coaching because they have self-worth challenges, because they have a sense of disconnection, because they have a sense of like helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness, all these different sort of secondary symptoms, which in my opinion, and it's not completely solved, but it could be very largely solved by reinforcing a healthy connection to life, to reality.
Well, that reminds me of, you know, man existed before language. Yeah. And that's like imagine living a whole life without language, the pre-language man. You're way more like feeling and less thinking, and then you're feeling everything around you.
Right.
And you can learn to do that again. Mm-hmm. I had, you know, people with a dialogue constantly running in your head. It's not a good thing. You need to have times where you're just at peace and you're observing and you're feeling. And then the dialogue often turns to, I didn't do this, screwed this up, oh man, well, you know, I got to do this later. It's not, and you're running that 24/7, you can't be like centered.
Well, what if, and this is just a possible thing to the thought experiment, like what if everything was conscious and you're part of that consciousness, and if you sort of start to recognize and value that connection to consciousness, and you could then build, let's call it a reciprocal relationship, as in you give some gratitude and some positivity and some openness and some love and some, like, you know, some appreciation to what is, and as a result of that, because of maybe perceptual frameworks or maybe it's a real thing, that you kind of get positive vibes back. You feel good, like you feel like, the world's a nice place, you know, I feel good, therefore the world's good, you know, I feel like I'm a good person, therefore, you know, I attract good people to myself. Now that's a very general rule, and yet again can become pretty naive and childish if you start to think that that's the only way it is. But having this reciprocal, healthy, open-hearted kind of perspective and relationship to life is something that it flicks a switch inside of our brains. And we did a bit of training on this in this last course, where I was talking about how, you know, we have like almost like two major like worldviews or tracks that we can operate from. And one worldview is basically like, you know, the world is painful and I need to protect myself from pain, and I have to work very hard to feel pleasure, and I have to accumulate resources and protect myself, and, you know, I have to find my way in the world so that I'm in the best position of competition in the gauntlet, you know, in the tournament of life, and this is very much like a competitive jungle kind of, like, you know, the biggest animal, the best animal, the fastest animals, like the king of the jungle kind of thing.
Like survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest kind of vibe, yeah. And once again, that's not an invalid worldview. Like there's truths to that, there's perspectives from that, and there's sometimes in life it's really good to be able to like hold your frame and have strength and being able to like have a strong personality in those aspects. But there is a completely different track that's like literally right in front of us, and sometimes we cannot even see it because it gets devalued. And it's basically a worldview that says that everything's kind of fundamentally perfect, in the sense that, like, it's here, it keeps like emerging, it keeps like regenerating itself, we're part of this process, and when we work with it, we can start to tune into a sense of self that is essentially like a positive orientated, pleasure-based, love-based, connection-based sense of self. And what that results in, when you can like really get this, like right now this is just an intellectual idea, but you really practice it, you go out into the world. I mean, and for example, in our training here, we were working with the John Keegan, you know, and John Keegan was taking us out and doing like a lot of social gym practices with the guys, and doing some really cool kinds of like focuses of like, this is not about picking up chicks, it's about being a connector, it's about being in the flow, it's about being in the moment, it's about being an observer, it's about being like, what does it mean to be someone that comes from the magic of connection, that comes from the transparency of your actual self?
I mean, I could speak to that anecdotally. I tend to be like this when I go throughout my life, and I have very good experiences with people, whether it's at a counter ordering food or calling someone up about my bill or whatever. Like, I come at them with like a friendly, loving, positive, hey, let me cheer you up kind of attitude. And everyone, like, I float around, I travel around the world, like, everyone's cool. Like, I have this weird concept that everyone's awesome. But I think part of it is that they're reflecting what I'm giving them, you know, because you talk to certain people and they're like, oh man, this guy, this person was a jerk, and this person didn't give me my money back, and I'm like, man, I don't see any of that. I never see it.
Yeah. Well, that's also, but yeah, exactly. It's about orientation, you know. So they're definitely setting yourself up to win. And that's because part of our key theme here is like destiny engineering. Like, how do you become a master of your destiny? Well, start to believe like the world's a good place. Start to believe people are basically good. Start to believe your connection, and this is where it gets kind of magical, is that when you start to be present with what is, and you start to create space, you know, and that's a kind of a hippie thing as well, but it's actually not. It's like, be conscious of like creating space, as Matt was saying. Like, you don't have to be in your like mental, like, you know, narrative, which is actually a secondary experience. Like, if you pay attention, like, you know, your thoughts and your feelings are a secondary experience to actual like reality. There's your senses are experiencing raw data, and right now it's like, something's happening. And if you're really present with that, there is no meaning on this moment. Like, there is no meaning on like how this works or who you are yet. And then a microsecond later, thanks to the, you know, the incredible power of the supercomputer of your mind, you start to create this kind of like secondary narrative process that's over the top of it. And we're in and out of that. And this is also not to say that, like, the whole purpose is not to like delete your mind. I'm not saying like, you know, everybody needs to become a Buddha and like be just like this transcendental vegetable who never like experiences life. And actually, like, that's not what true mystical knowledge or true like application of spiritual health and well-being is really about. It's about like integrating. So recognizing like you have a mind, that mind is an important part of you, but if you let that mind become, let's say, the boss, like the king, how it kind of obsesses you all the time, then that can become like draining. And what it really does is it takes up the space. So there's no space for the magic of life to happen. So if you've ever had experiences where you just chilled out and relaxed and you just let things be and you had positive vibes and you created like the possibility where things can just happen, you probably find that like that things just fall together. You know, you're in the right place, the right time, right people, right circumstances, even little things, you know, like little things happen where good fortune will start to arise. And even perceived bad fortune actually turns out to be good fortune, which is a bit of a trip too. You're like, that was really good that happened because it helped me to get here. So it's kind of like starting to remove this very like, you know, controlling, yet again, like this reactive kind of like, I've got to have everything under control, I've got to have everything in order kind of perspective, and letting life like work with you, letting the whole process of life work with you. And I mean, that's kind of like a fundamental stage. Like that's something that's super important and super powerful. And if we don't like, let's say, accommodate or acclimatize ourselves to what that is, then I think we're missing out on a massive part of life. And especially in our modern context, like we are really struggling, I think, because of this disconnection. So yet again, to bring it back to what we're doing here, is like prioritizing and creating time, space, and practice to be able to like bring yourself into a present moment and to connect and to experience pleasure of life. It's a massive it's a massive part of the game of life. Yeah. So, but moving on from that, like let's look at it in terms of like after that, then it's also about tribe. It's about building friends, networks, brotherhood, and also building a life. So that's also part of destiny engineering, is like having a plan. And that's a big part of what
That's my weakness.
That's what, yeah, it's part of my weakness too, actually, is like, I mean, I'm a very creative person, I'm not a very structured person, even though I'm learning all the time. But the point is that, you know, what we did here was we created like what we call a living master plan structure, which was like this, you know, overview of your life and breaking things down and getting into the departments and setting goals and tasks and all those kinds of things. And mostly because there is something very fulfilling, yet again, to our minds when we have a plan. And that doesn't mean we have to constantly stick with that plan, but we can kind of be flexible about that. And I think you had some pretty healthy perspectives on that. I mean, you were talking about your health and your fitness, which is one of your primary like values, etc. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about how you approach that as a fairly like sort of contained and ordered aspect, but also flexible and has sorts of ranges of you know, allowance for things to happen.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about like how you work with your health and well-being as a plan?
Well, it's like general principles, guidelines, like certain things that are total garbage, I really won't eat, and certain things I try to eat every day because they're so healthy. But I'm not crazy about it. If I'm out with a bunch of friends and we're getting pizza, I'm going to eat the pizza. And if I miss a few days of, you know, green tea, I'm not going to freak out about it. And the same thing with the gym. Like, I kind of think we should all work out, try to work out every day, but life is, you know, life happens and things happen and you probably won't get to do it every day, but you try to do it every day, and then 5 days a week, 4 days a week, that's awesome. That's more than enough. So it's like, if you're too regimented, you don't give yourself the freedom to have fun, travel, feel pleasure in certain ways. And the stress of being too regimented is unhealthy. You need to pat yourself on the back and feel good about the things you do and not chastise yourself for the things you miss. Yeah. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And a lot of people, they think it's all or nothing. They have to do 100% of everything right, and they just don't do anything. And then they wait 2 years and say, well, in 2 months I'll be able to go to the gym 5 days a week for an hour and eat really healthy. It's like, no, just work out 10 minutes twice a week first. You know, stop eating ice cream every night and freaking start there, and then move from there. Yeah. So I'm not crazy regimented, and you know, certain people like that, but most people don't. Yeah. And then you could apply that to everything in life. Yeah. It applies to everything. You don't have to be crazy regimented. You have your general principles, and if you follow them, you'll be good.
And that, because I think that's a really common theme for a lot of guys when it comes to social stuff, is they feel like, you know, that they're missing out on this whole world of social connection and what it means to be a social guy. And sometimes it's very valid. I mean, if you live in an office for 80% of your life, or you know, you isolate yourself and you don't hang out in public places and you don't have any human exchanges, then you know it's really important that you get out there and you start to get some connections. But on the other end of the spectrum, it doesn't mean you have to go out every day and approach 20 girls and get all these this you know, intense kind of socialization.
Or more importantly, doesn't mean you have to feel bad about not doing that,
Right.
which is what a lot of people do.
Exactly. So
They start to hate on themselves for not doing all these things all the time.
Correct. So yeah, having unreasonable expectations on yourself and unrelenting standards. I mean, that's part of what I heal when I do one-on-one coaching with people, is helping people get over, let's say, addiction to being perfectionists, addiction to having very high standards. Not that there's anything wrong with high standards, but the problem is when you don't match your expectations of those high standards, and then you experience pain. So you're walking around experiencing disappointment, frustration, hopelessness, helplessness, pain, guilt, shame, whatever it is, as a result of the fact that your worldview, the way that you see the world and the way that you want the world to be, doesn't match your actual experience. So rather than that, I think it's better to find a kind of a middle ground where it's like, okay, I'm trending towards improvement, and within that trend, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have at the stage that I am. And if that means right now I'm a little bit tired and I don't really want to be social, but at least I can go out of the house and I can go for a walk and smile at some people, that's better than nothing. Or sometimes it even means it's acknowledging, it's like, well, you know, I have an expectation I should be going and doing a lot of approaching right now, but really what I need to do is rest. I need to spend some time reading a book or having a snooze or doing something that's going to be nice, so that then I can get my mojo back, so that then I can go out and actually do the thing that I really want to do. You know, there is a lot of benefit in pushing yourself through, you know, let's say through certain illusionary blockage points, but more important than that, in my opinion, is being able to create a worldview where you're flexible enough and adaptable enough to actually allow yourself to be winning across as many spectrums as possible.
It's really striking a balance between putting too much pressure on yourself, stressing yourself out, and being too hard on yourself, or making excuses and not doing enough. You want to be somewhere in between, and you're going to float kind of from one side to the other naturally.
Yep.
And you just kind of watch yourself, and you're cool with it until you get to the one end or the other, and then you have to say, hey, I gotta get my act together. But as you kind of go through the middle, you gotta roll with it. You can't be self-analyzing every day, every hour. Oh man, I'm at this club and I didn't talk to someone in 10 minutes. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, exactly.
It's open for another 2 hours.
Yeah, let yourself off the hook, or maybe focus on some other things. It's cool, I didn't talk to anybody. That means I can meditate right now. Use other parts of your, let's say your practices of value. So no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, you're always doing something that's useful for you. You're always doing something that can help you to kind of develop some part of yourself. And once again, I think that's a healthy perspective. Of course, I mean, these are generalizations, but I think they're good general kinds of trends to start to get into mind, because it just allows you to enjoy life. And when you enjoy life, you tend to make better decisions. You make better decisions, you tend to attract better things. You have better things, you tend to feel like overall your life is better, your state increases. So the whole thing becomes like a positive kind of feedback loop, which is super important. Which also brings us to the next kind of thing that we worked on, is we did work on routines, right? As in, you know, getting into routines is a powerful thing. And honestly, I'm not the world's greatest routine person.
Me neither.
Yeah, so we've got to work on that. But routines are really important, especially in the sense of having routines that get you into a good place. So for example, one of the key things that I like to teach guys at the moment is, you know, routines that help with raising your energy. Raising your sense of self so that you feel good as fast as possible. And there's things that you can do that will knock you down. There's things that we do that will pick you up. So, you know, things like stretching, moving, breathing, you know, eating healthy, sleeping. I mean, that stuff is going to help you a lot to have a fundamental base that is basically a functional skill that to create much more of a better kind of life. And that in turn then, you know, it gives you the power to be able to do stuff. So a lot of people don't even realize how hard they're making their own lives just by virtue of the fact that they're running at a constant deficit because of bad routines, you know, not sleeping regularly, not eating the right stuff, I mean, abusing their bodies in some way, you know, basically leaking energy, doing things that are not healthy for them. And of course, when you do that kind of shit, you feel depressed, you feel heavy, you feel tired, you feel antisocial, you don't feel like you're capable of doing those things.
And then you don't realize it's because of that, and you think it's because of something else, and you start to go in a downward spiral. You blame yourself for other reasons that aren't even true, and you start.
Or you blame everybody else. It's
Yeah,
even worse. You know, it's like it's women, it's the government, it's fucking this, it's that, and then that creates all these secondary issues, which are actually like unnecessary dramas to a degree. So yet again, trying to be honest with yourself, trying to work out your routines, trying to get on track with what's good for you is super important. And to set up a plan, yet again, where you've got like, I mean, what we're working with at the moment with the Living Master Plan is 10 different departments of life, right? So we have like.
Oh, you saved the ant.
Yeah,
You're such a good guy.
Saved the life.
You just saved the ant.
Wow, that was an amazing
I didn't give a
show.
shit about the ant, and you saved the ant.
Yeah. So we're talking, like, to get back to what we're talking about there's 10 areas of life. When you're working on those 10 areas, and once again, that can be somewhat arbitrary, but it's things like, your health, your social life, your financial life, working on your spiritual development, all these different aspects. But when you develop, like, a plan, and of course it's different for different people, but you work out, like, what are my top 2 or 3 areas that I really want to work on? How can I put a plan around them? And how can I also make sure that the other secondary parts of my life are still getting some attention from time to time? Then you end up with this, yet again, positive learning curve, this positive trend of transformation, which I think is, like, super key. Mm-hmm. So yeah, bringing all that into process is a key, because it gives you self-worth, it gives you power, it gives you, like, strength.
I mean, for me, that doing the wheel and then taking the tasks and things I want to do when I get back to the United States and organizing it by looking at the wheel, it really made me create a clear plan of what I'm going to do when I'm back, rather than I tend to be more like chaotic with what I do and
freestyle.
whatever is in front of me.
Yeah.
But it felt really good. Like, I feel very secure in, like, the progress I'm going to make the next 3 months and all, like, the cool things I'm going to do.
It's super powerful. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about it as a kind of like a self-authoring kind of process. So it's similar kind of nature to that, except we're using some digital tools, and what we're talking about, we say the wheel, we're talking about the wheel of life, like breaking your life into a wheel, working out where you're at from 0 to 10, looking at what you can do in those areas, identifying your values. So it's all pretty typical personal development, life coachy stuff. And in many ways can be quite kind of like soulless if it doesn't have like a larger perspective around it, which is really what we're striving to kind of put together here. And ultimately, like, to bring it back onto a larger narrative here, it's about being liberated, it's about being free. It's also about having the value in your life where you're not dependent on other people's, like, judgment of you or value of you to feel satisfied. And I think, it's something that I'm constantly, see is guys are, like, absolutely fucking obsessed with having, like, some Barbie doll girlfriend. And like, there's nothing wrong with attractive women, there's nothing wrong with sex, there's nothing wrong with having great connections and things like that. But I think that the larger, more important, like, process of evolving your character, becoming someone of substance, like having a direction and a purpose, building resources, all these things that are absolutely necessary to being a satisfied human being, get kind of put on the sideline because we've been so influenced by the mind control of, like, the shiny object, the big titties and the nice curves and the pretty face and all that kind of stuff. So I think that can be something that's a challenge for us, because we are all, to some degree, and it's an evolutionary thing, under the spell of, sexual desire and what that means.
Oh, but if you don't have the substance and the strength inside, you're going to have a very hard time keeping that Barbie doll.
Right. Also, where it gets kind of ugly as well is, even if you're really good at getting Barbie dolls, sometimes having Barbie dolls is still not very that fun. It's not that satisfying. So you got to recognize that there's more to it than just, like, having babes around you. Even though having a lifestyle that is attractive and valuable and useful, to have babes around is a kind of a cool thing. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, the thing that's most important, in my opinion, is the fact that you wake up and you're satisfied with your sense of self first. And then everything else is added to that. So you're already winning, and then you're just adding bonus levels to that. And of course, like, typically, especially in our modern context, and especially when it comes to attractive women gonna come and go. Relationships are gonna come and go. And I think there's a lot of guys out there coming from a very, naive perspective of feeling like, if they just go out and approach some girls, then they're going to get this super hot girlfriend and everything's going to be okay, and then they'll live happily ever after. And I mean, you might do that a little bit in your 20s, and that's cool. But you get, if you really stick to it and you start to push through those walls, you start to see, there's actually much more to it than this.
You can't put your value in your girl.
Right.
You got to hold your value in yourself.
Mm-hmm. And you can't put your value in your dick either. Yeah.
I can't.
Well, you can put your value in your dick, but you got to be careful about if that's your only value, because there's other values.
I think when I was young and I was dating, I really like saw my self-esteem through the girl I was with, and that's dangerous. And it's not a good way to keep a healthy relationship.
You become dependent. You become codependent. You become aggressive. You become needy. I mean, there's a lot of weird things that start to happen as a result of all that kinds of perspectives. And like again, any healthy, socially intelligent, woman is going to be like not interested in getting involved in that kind of thing as well. And also any woman out there, which is a lot of them these days, that have a lot of like sexual market value. Let's say they have a lot of attention, they have a lot of control, they have a lot of freedom in the sense of a lot of options. They're coming from a massive sense of abundance. So like. It's really hard. Even if you are a super good quality guy with a lot of substance and a lot of good things going on, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stick around, because there's so many different like desires and switches and levels going on.
And their attention span isn't what it used to be. It's about like of a flea, I would say.
Depending on the situation, but yeah, definitely. But anyway, the point is, we're trying to fortify ourselves against all this bullshit. So if I was to boil it down, like what a big part of what I'm really trying to get at with this idea of the Liberated Man project is, it's like, how do you fortify yourself against the bullshit? How do you neutralize yourself against as much bullshit as possible? Societal influence bullshit, your own internal bullshit, sexual, dating bullshit, and to become somebody who has like a position of freedom, positivity, choice, and resilience against the face of all these things. Because whether we like it or not, shit happens, basically. Shit happens a lot. Like, people get sick, people die, things fuck up. You have challenges, and, people betray each other. So you're going to have to learn to deal with that on some kind of level. And it takes a certain level of maturity and skill and resilience to be able to handle that. And yet again, that's why I sort of created this program. So the original metaphor that I came up with for this program was the idea of the heist. And for anybody who knows what a heist is, a heist is, when there's a job to do, it's a high value job, it comes with risk, and a group of specialists come together with an aim to crack the job to get the outcome. And when I say the heist, what I'm talking about is, what are we heisting? We're heisting our freedom, we're heisting our destiny, we're heisting our sense of self back from the matrix, back from the world, back from society's judgments, opinions, these kinds of things. So to take on this mindset of, you are a significant and important person that is part of a job, and that job is a very important job, which is to receive and to take back and to claim your own freedom, your own power, your own sovereignty, your own innocence, your own capacity, your own skill, your own destiny, and to be able to own that in the world in a practical kind of way. And that's not something that's probably going to take one day. It's going to be something that takes months, years, application, feedback. It's going to take mentoring. It's going to take support. It's going to take trials and errors and initiations and ordeals. It's going to take all of that. And welcome to the hero's journey. Welcome to the broader context of life. You don't have to take that path if you don't want, but the price you pay for not owning your own sovereignty and your own path of reclamation is that you will be a servant of something else. You will be, a kind of, a servant or a slave of another worldview, somebody else's position. And that's not to say that you're always, you're ever completely free either, because we're all tied into this together. Obviously we're all part of an economic paradigm, we're all part of a globalized fucking world, we're all part of cultural exchanges, all these things that are influencing us.
We're all part of Instagram.
All part of the data banks, the data lords that own us in different ways. So all of that stuff is part of the world that we live in these days. But yet again, and this is something that I learned a very long time ago, back in the 90s, is that if we don't take responsibility for creating our own realities, we'll wake up in somebody else's reality. And that might be McDonald's, you know what I mean? Do you want to wake up in a McDonald's reality? I don't want to wake up in a McDonald's reality. And you could switch McDonald's for the Google reality or the Facebook reality or the, whatever you want to call it reality. but it's about you as an individual activating your own creative potential, your imagination, your will, your desire, your truth, your skill, everything that you can to be like the best kind of human that you can be. So that's why I brought together this 14-day program, and that's what Maddie's here for. So maybe you want to talk about like what was that like the last 14 days we've been hanging out in tropical paradise. You've been hanging out with the bros, you've been talking to girls, you've been learning heaps of cool shit.
It was definitely like a life-changing experience, and I've done a lot of life-changing experiences. Well, you exposed me to a lot of different exercises and philosophies and different practices, and doing them all in these 2 weeks, it felt like I had like the growth of like a year.
Give us a bit of a walkthrough, without giving too much away. Give us a walkthrough of what it was like for you as the participant.
I would say, like for example, the breathing exercises. I've never really gotten into that. All these different types of breathing exercises, and it really registered with me. It's like this is a tool to connect, because I meditate. I've been meditating for 10 years, and I worked out for 20 something years, but I never did breathing stuff like this, and it's another tool to connect the mind-body. It's another tool to control your feeling, your thoughts, to center yourself, to either bring energy in or relax. Like there's so many different ways to do it, and so doing that routine in the morning and learning about, and then also the freedom movements we did. There's all stuff that's outside of the box for me. But a lot of the stuff we did was outside of the box.
Because just to give you some context, and I know what that's like. You come from a fairly standard masculine culture, right? You want to do fitness, you go and you do bicep curls.
I didn't even play tennis because it was
too fucking young. Those people play tennis. They're what they're like.
I mean, I played tennis, but not in high school. I played baseball because baseball was cool and tennis was like.
Tennis is not fucking cool.
That's how stupid. That's so dumb. But yeah. There's so many different sides. There's that side, and then a big one was going in. So Shay does a lot of work where you kind of connect with your subconscious, then you go inside and you find out about yourself through different techniques, and like the whole warrior, king, magician, lover paradigm, and going in there. We did different practices, and I learned a lot about myself. I got more understanding about my strengths and weaknesses, and then it's all about we all have different parts of ourselves, but a lot of times they're segmented. They're not interconnected, and I think becoming a fully realized, achieving fully realized man kind of area, actualized man, is you connect all them together. So you connect your kind of warrior guy with your magician, which is more of the fun. You connect them all together, and then they work together, and then you understand who you are, and then you can pull strengths when you need them, and that was great. I felt a lot of benefits from doing that.
We also did some deep dive kind of inner work as well. We did some one-on-one work. It's part of the program where you get one-on-one attention with a coach, with me or another really excellent transformation coach. Yep. And a lot of that's about looking at, and that's not just simple stuff. We do psychometric testing, we review your life, we get understanding of your values, your needs, what are your personality glitches, what's the history, what are your traumas, all this kind of stuff. And we kind of comb through that and look at how can we create resolution, resources, a better narrative. So maybe talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
For me personally, my mom died about 13, 14 years ago, and then the way I dealt with it was I kind of didn't think about her, and I just kind of went on with my life. And essentially, I was at a point where I didn't ever think about my childhood or her. That's called a block. So I just wouldn't think about it at all. And if someone said anything, oh, what your mom did, I would just say some superficial thing, but I couldn't see her face. I just was that's over. And then I'm an only child. My father kind of almost did. They were in love, but he almost kind of did the same thing. He doesn't really mention her. We both have the same freaking mental problems. Anyway. We went over this prior, and as part of my evaluation. So when we did the one-on-one brain-changing type stuff, it was really amazing. So one of the goals was to try to remove the block, and it was very successful, and it's amazing. It felt like a weight was lifted, and now I've that was like a week or two ago, and now I've been, bringing up memories, and I can do it now, and I'm trying to make it more of a habit to reconnect with my childhood and with my mother. And then I'm really going to talk to my father about it when I get back, because it's just the old school kind of mentality of just sweeping things under the rug that are really upsetting, I think.
Yeah.
So that was just like, that's right there. That's a life-changing thing, and it was in one session, one day. And that's the interesting thing about blocks is if someone knows what they're doing, they can remove it. It's like a curtain, and then it's gone. It's
We've done quite a lot of that work, and that might be interesting for guys to hear about as well, because me and Maddie have been working one-on-one, on and off for the last couple of years, every couple of months, and we've pushed through a lot of different layers. So you want to talk about what's shifted in your life and what's changed over the years that you've worked doing basically in a game focus, as long with your typical lifestyle.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I met you, I had this great life, but I had a warped sense of who I was, and I felt like I was a failure at all different things, and I couldn't see the reality of it.
Because you had self-image stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
So, I mean, interesting thing about Matt is he was coming from a place where he didn't perceive himself as attractive, didn't perceive himself as a winner, or as somebody who was worthy of, basically love or worthiness in some sense. And obviously how did that affect your life when you were coming from that place?
It was weird because, I'd be in relationships with great girls, but there's a piece of me that felt like I didn't deserve it, or that I was a fraud, or I tricked her, or if I hooked up with a girl, I would think that she had horrible taste or something was wrong with her. And it was like a story that I believed strongly, and it really affected even how I understood the world, and certainly, my relationships were always good, but because I'm a good communicator, but it really made me not happy about a lot of things. I couldn't accept love like a normal person, I think, and so that all got cleared up. I mean, I feel great.
Well, you mentioned some things like for example, you wouldn't be able to talk to people without feeling like they were seeing something disgusting about you, or that that was affecting your social interactions and your ability to meet girls, your ability to feel vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I would fight through it, or I would drink a lot. Basically, I'd party a lot.
Anybody else out there does that kind of shit?
Shay helped me with that too. I barely drank on this whole trip, and we went out to clubs and did a whole bunch of cool shit, and I felt great. It's amazing. I was in a fraternity. We would get drunk like 4 nights a week. That was my system for meeting girls, was you just get really drunk, and then you throw yourself at a party or at a bar, and then every once in a while cool shit happens. Yeah. Sometimes you get beat up, and sometimes you get kicked out, and sometimes you get laid, and you don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. Yeah. It's not really a good system. not the best system.
It's kind of a bit unreliable. Yeah.
And then you're not controlling it. You know.
So, I mean, do you enjoy yourself when you're having like those kinds of intimacies? I mean, it's like, can you even have good sex when you're drunk and like?
I can. I have
okay, well, that's good as long as you're happy with that. Yeah.
I've had some bad times. I've had some fails.
And dealing with all the different dynamics that come out of that. I mean, once again, pros and cons of everything. But I mean, like, now that you're, let's say, living a cleaner, more healthy orientation to yourself and to the world, like.
No, but it's all holding value within yourself rather than walking around saying, "Oh, am I valuable? Am I attractive? Am I good? Am I good?" It's like you can't walk around like that. So that was the work we did. It's like I hold my value within me.
And what's it like working through blocks? Because that's kind of what we're talking about. So you've had experiences of like having a worldview, and then you apply some technology to it, and then that worldview is different, and your reality becomes different.
Yeah. Well,
And you've had some very big shifts. So I think
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to talk about how some of those things happen for you.
I mean, it's the inner dialogue changes. It reverses really. Well, I mean, in general, you help me. Instead of I'm very opinionated. I always think about something the right way, the one way, and a lot of times there's like a negative way about me, and you taught me that there are many ways to think about one thing. There's not one way, and that it's really important to count. Now I automatically I think one thing, then I counter it with a different perspective, then I see another perspective. It gives you wisdom, it gives you peace. You're not overreacting to really anything. So that applied across the board. But and then about the stories you tell yourself, reasons why things happen, or often I would always think it's like the worst reason, all about me. I did something wrong. I'm bad. I'm not hot enough. I'm not good enough. I'm too short. Blah 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 blah. And it's like then you find out, oh, this person went away, and then they call you 2 days later, and I was like freaking out. Like it's all a waste of energy. But I was a habit that I couldn't break.
Mm-hmm. Because of the perception of self, that's the challenge. When you have a limited perception of self, then the limited perception of self will create the reality from a limited perspective. So it just keeps kind of feeding on itself, which is an uncomfortable thing to deal with. So obviously that you've made some really big shifts. I mean, in the time that I've known you, I mean, your sense of social self has become much more free. Your dating life's become improved. Your health is improved. Your self-destructive tendencies disappear.
Oh God, yeah, that was we did an anger session. It was amazing.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I used to smash things and rip doors off walls and punch holes and shit. But I mean, we literally did a 3.5-hour session. We reviewed some of my behaviors. We went inside. We did some shit. He did his magic. Woo, woo, woo. And I've never gotten flipped out and broken anything in like 2 years from one session.
It's amazing.
Crazy.
It's amazing the amount of leverage you can get from the right thing at the right time. Huh? It really shifts a lot of things.
That's just like sometimes people can't believe the level of change you can achieve if you have an open mind and work with someone who's really talented. It's literally life-changing in a day.
We don't know what we don't know, and that's the problem, right? And I mean, that's not to say that every pattern can be changed in a matter of minutes or hours. I mean, there are definite situations. Like we had a guy on this recent course who, and he made big improvements over the 2 weeks that he was here, but he was dealing with, I mean, a lifetime of very heavy, difficult, kind of limited perspectives. And I mean, you could definitely see he's a lot lighter, a lot happier, and we definitely like flipped his whole mentality around. And I'm still, curious to see like how he settles into that process over the coming weeks and months, and we'll be checking in with him as time goes on. But it can take some consistency and some time. And also, if you've got a complex issue, which I'm no stranger to myself, I mean, I've got lots of complex issues that I've faced in my life, and also dealt with hundreds with clients, is you got to like work on applying like different methodologies, different angles, different support systems. And once again, that's a big thing that I'm really like trying to get into, the best way possible with this kind of Liberated Man project. Is like, how can we build a multidimensional package with a multidimensional support team with, the right kinds of like platforms and support and knowledge and feedback, so that it can really do the job that's necessary. Because working with human beings and working with our operating system, working with the way that we perceive things, it's a full-time skill set, and it's something that we need to like learn how to really honor and make sense of. And the benefit of that, which is what we were saying before, is like it gives you like a completely different sense of self in the world, and you have like this kind of switch to a different kind of orientation. And I really believe, in some sense, like when you make these orientation shifts, when you shift the way that you see and feel and understand the world, it's literally like a parallel dimension starts to open. It's like there's a different reality of socializing, a different reality of connecting, a different reality of feeling, a different reality of destiny becomes available. And you can go backwards if you want. I mean, you can always go back into your shitty old patterns if you truly choose to and you really want to. But when you give yourself like a choice and it makes sense to what's going to feel good or not good, then it's a bit of a no-brainer. Like it just kind of does its thing, because that's the beauty of working with the nervous system in these kinds of
Yeah,
ways.
part of what you do is you give people the ability to make a choice. Whereas if you're reacting to emotions, a lot of times we only have one program we react with. We don't even have the choice. And I see that as like the major way to improve and change is you give it, and then when you're in the moment and you have the emotion or you have the problem, instead of just doing the thing you always did, now you can see, oh man, I could do it this way, and your nature will pick the better option.
Yeah, it's super important. And that's, again, it's kind of cool because that's the way the system is actually orientated. Like our nervous systems, if you give yourself a painful and a pleasurable choice, typically, if you're a healthy human being, you're going to go for the pleasurable choice. So if you make it clear to yourself, like you got this choice where you could just be a hopeless shithead, or you got this choice where you can be like a liberated hero, and your brain's like, I'll take that one, thanks. So it's a process of integrating those kinds of things. There's lots of details that I could go into about explaining that. And I mean, right now, for example, we're just kind of breezing over the top of the surface of things because there's quite a lot of levels. But I think, it's just a bit of an introductory kind of worldview and an understanding of what we're really doing here and what's important when it comes to like becoming a liberated man on the path. So overall, you're happy that you came, yeah?
It's like one of the best things I ever did. And it's at the perfect time in my life. And it's going to be, I'm going to have reverberations of this for months and months and months. I'm very excited.
I'm looking forward to hearing what happens next.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I think for now we should probably wrap this up because I think it's been a good amount of time to kind of just explore some good themes and ideas and introduce you guys to what's been happening with us at the Liberated Man Institute of Awesomeness.
Thank you, Shay.
Thanks, man.
I love you, Shay.
I love you, Maddie.
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah! Bro force! So thanks for listening, everybody. If you want to find out more, you can check out ShayMatthews.com because that's my current website. There's going to be more to be released, lots of cool things happening. Make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you like, make sure that you share, make sure that you do the good thing, which is to become a liberated man. And until next time, this is Maddie saying, well, this is Shay and Maddie saying, peace out.